Alright guys, this is just going to be quick and dirty. If you've seen the title of this video and you already know what this watch is, this isn't a review. There's like hundreds of YouTube reviews on this watch. It's a pretty popular watch. This is the box it came in. I ordered mine off Amazon. I've been looking at this watch for a little while. It usually goes for, geez, I don't know, I think about $50 Canadian, but it was on sale for 40 recently. So this is how mine arrived. The tin was heavily dented, but when I opened it, the watch was perfectly fine inside. This is the watch right here. This is a retro LED style watch. So in the mid 70s, moving away from, analog watches with the kind of advent of digital watches, they weren't initially LCD. They were originally LED. Typically red LEDs, they might have been like vacuum fluorescent, like the early calculators. They had those really, really thin segments. But yeah, this was like pre-LCD. And, in the mid 70s, these were expensive watches, believe it or not. And some companies like Belova, and I think it's Yema, like a French brand, they still make some of these 70s inspired retro LED watches, but they're like $300 plus. The watch is kind of exactly what I was expecting. I knew that it wasn't going to be a large watch, and actually I kind of feared it would be too small for me. I'm a big guy, and I have like 7.5-inch wrists. This comes in different colors. Obviously the gold one here, but there's a silver and a black coated, and you can also get it with, I believe, blue or green LEDs. Green for sure I've seen. I wanted the red, obviously. I wanted this thing to look as late 70s, early 80s as possible. And for me, that's the gold with the red LEDs. The case is actually metal. The case is actually stainless steel, believe it or not. Unlike most Casios in this price range, for example, I've got out here. A lot of these Casios, this is about a $30 watch, but a lot of the Casios in this price range that look like they're metal, the case is actually made out of plastic. And then they put some sort of a chrome coating on there, and you can tell these scratch really easy. They're a little lighter. It's a little bit thinner, but I got this out for a size comparison because like a lot of people are familiar with the F91. The size of an F91 and a 158 is basically the same. A 158 is basically just a metal, as we just discussed, metal version of the F91. And so, yeah, I got that out for a size comparison. I think they're both 36 millimeters in diameter. I would say, width-wise, they're pretty close. And like lug to lug, the Armatron is a fair bit taller. Its lugs are also sort of hidden, more like a 168. And a 168 is a little bit fatter, too. This guy is really thick, and I actually kind of like that. When this is on my wrist, the thickness, I think, kind of helps it look like it's a bigger watch. Even though diameter-wise or width-wise, it's not. Lug to lug, it is, but the thickness also helps. And yeah, so you got a plain stainless steel backing on it. They don't have the color, the gold color on there. That might be because that part is going to be touching your skin. These old watches in the 70s, these LED style watches, before the LCD watches became common. And when these became common, they also became cheap. Mid to late 70s, like this might have been a $300, $400, $500, $600 watch, believe it or not. And obviously by the mid 80s, these were like a dime a dozen. So economies of scale came into play there, and moving from LEDs to LCD. Now the thing with LED is light emitting diode. That uses a lot of power. And so these early LED watches all had one thing in common, and that is that you don't see the display at all times like you will on an LCD watch. Obviously the LCD screen there, the LCD display, uses very little power. Mid 70s to late 70s, that wasn't the case. These LEDs used a lot of power, well, relatively speaking. But the flip side was you could see that in the dark, and with something like this, it had to have a separate light. So this is kind of like pressing the light button, and you know, it displays for a few seconds, and you can see the time, as I kind of just gave away there. If you press it again, you see the date, so 9th month, 29th day, and then you see the seconds. But yeah, that was common on a lot of these watches in the late 70s, that you would press the button again to see the date and then the seconds. The quality of the bracelet, at first I thought it was like worse than a Casio, which isn't saying much. I mean, a cheap 158 is not known for having a high quality bracelet. Again, this is a $30 watch, so kind of is what it is. But yeah, at first glance I thought, oh geez, the quality on that looks even worse than a Casio. But yeah, then I looked at the Casio, and actually it's pretty similar. The style of clasp is exactly the same. In fact, it almost looks like it's the same stamping. It doesn't feel 100% the same. I think this part here is a little thinner and feels a little bit cheaper. But that might just be in my head. It's definitely not the exact same stamping, actually. If you look at where the joint is, it's a little narrower on the Casio. But it's odd how similar it is, isn't it? I think because this is the gold color, its imperfections show a little bit easier, maybe, in the reflections. The links are a little bit different. They're H links on here, where they're like a true 3-piece on here. But yeah, very, very, very similar. And that is to say, you know, if you complained about the quality of the bracelet on a $30 Casio, you're going to complain about the quality on this $40 or even $50 Armatron. But again, this is metal and this is plastic. So honestly, the 10, 15, maybe $20 price difference between these two is not really a big deal. I think you're paying for that metal, and you're paying for that LED movement, you know, as opposed to a more common LCD. The crystal on this is obviously just acrylic. I'm sure that's going to scratch really easily. Again, this isn't a watch I'm going to wear. This isn't going to be a daily. You know, I have a lot of watches. I've got beaters. I've got G-Shocks. I've got dive watches with sapphire. Those are the ones I'm going to wear every day. Those are the ones that are going to be beaters. You know, even this, like I said, the F91W, I do wear them once in a while, but they're not dailies. I typically won't wear them to work. And so a lot of these vintage watches or vintage inspired watches, they're just going to be small. That's just the way it is. So again, I've got 7.5-inch wrists. You know, I was a little concerned if I could pull this off, but I would say I can. It's wearable. Again, not something I'm going to wear every day, but that's fine. I didn't buy it for that.